All right, Oggie, the residential rental property expert with our monthly series here. We talked a lot about buying properties, how to do the burr on steroids. We covered all that on previous episodes. Now we're going to talk about you have the property, you got the thing refied, you're trying to get renters in there. How do we manage these assets over the long term so we can be successful? Because the reason I'm bringing this up in the beginning, Oggie, is because I see a lot of people, they buy rental properties and then they absolutely can't stand the management and they end up selling them and they squander their wealth they can make over the long haul. But if you get this step figured out and you can get the management really optimized, it's going to make your experience so much better. And you happen to own a property management company out in Phoenix, so you certainly know what you're talking about when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, my situation is quite unusual. I have the point of view of an investor, landlord, property manager, owner of rental property. So I can give you quick different advice. Advice is as far as managing the properties by yourself and what to look in the property manager procedures if you're going to hire one.
100%, because Lord knows there's a million property managers out there, and
oh man, the level of service is so low.
The bar is so low. I always say this, like we had a tough business month in July, and I was talking to Brett. I'm like, you know what, man? It's really not that hard to be successful. You just can't be a complete idiot and do what you say you're going to do and have decent systems. And it's almost like over the long haul, it's like impossible to not be successful.
Be nice to people.
Cool.
And
be cool.
They'll forgive you for making mistakes.
Exactly. So let's start with this. This is very privy to some of these tougher markets, like where it comes to landlord tenant laws, screening tenants, because I see, at least in New York, where I do a lot of my investing, it's very difficult to get people out. We'll cover the evictions, obviously, later on the show. But what do you look for as a property manager, as an investor, landlord, in terms of screening tenants? Like, what are the things that you look for to make sure that tenant is really qualified to live in that home?
Man, there's so much stuff. But let's try to get the most important thing.
Yes.
Everything else, we have to do a background check. That's the first. And when you do the background check, what's the most important? What to look for? So let's say you run the background check, and usually either your property management company does it, or you go online. There's already these services that they can do nationwide screening on tenants. You pay maybe $25. Or there's always, in every market, in every city, there's a local guy that does screening for tenants. And the local guys, they are always better in running background checks for you guys. So look for somebody local in the market. So we have some here, but here's the problem. They don't work on Saturday and Sunday. So, you have to give up a little bit things. And then the screening takes 24 hours, not 24 minutes, like some of the nationwide screening, but the screening is better. So when you get the background check, what to look for? Bad credit. We look at bad credit, but we look for overall, what's the financial background of the person? Have they have a lot of payments, a lot of history of not paying, a lot of debt and things like that? So that's one thing. Bankruptcies. So here's the thing. I don't care about bankruptcies. If a bankruptcy has been filed and closed, then it's good, which means that the person cannot file another bankruptcy for a certain period of time.
Sure.
Then you're safe. Because if a tenant files bankruptcy during the tenancy that is in property, you cannot talk to the tenant. You have to wait your day in court. So it could take some time. The other thing is, in addition to the background check, felonies, things like that, big no-no is previous evictions.
Interesting.
Evictions is absolutely no-go with us. Absolutely no-go. Bad credit, bankruptcies, short sales, foreclosures, it's fine. We can overlook these things. Eviction, absolutely not. You already proved that you don't care about your previous landlord. That means that you're not going to care about me. So you're absolutely done. No eviction. So if you're a tenant listening, do not do evictions because you're done with all the property management companies.
It's so obvious at that point. It's like they've already been evicted.
Yes.
It's going to happen again. History repeats itself, as they say.
Yeah, it's showing that you have no respect to the landlord.
And it's public record.
Yeah, you're done. You're done.
What is the income rule of thumb that you look for? Let's say the rent on your property is $2,500 a month. What is like the minimum income you're going to look for to make sure that resident can actually afford the property and be successful paying the rent?
Right off the bat, most property management companies will tell you 3 times the rent
Monthly.
monthly. But this is what I'm implementing right now in our property management company. We are basing the properties on A, B, and C quality properties. A, B, and C based on how good they are. A, luxury, top of the line, the best property in town. B, your average property that you can find everywhere.
Sure.
C, maybe an apartment in a little bit transitional area. The building is not that great. So in all these 3, it's different type of properties, different type of people that are going to apply for these properties. So on a A properties, I want the maximum income possible. Let's say if we want on a B, which is the average, 3 times the rent. On an A, I want 4 times the rent.
Okay. So you want to make sure that person can really financially.
Yes, 4 times the rent. And I want, more security deposit. I bring the level up. The barrier goes up on A properties.
Sure.
On a B properties, the average, everything's normal. 3 times the rent, 1 time security deposit, things like that. But when we go down to the C properties, we're understanding that we might be getting people that with lower income overall. So then we can lower the barrier to 2.5 times the rent.
For the C properties.
For the C properties, yes. So whatever you decide to do, the rule has to be across the board on all your portfolios at every single time. All the A properties, 1 rule. All the B properties, 1 rule. All the C properties, 1 rule at any time, because you might be breaking fair housing regulations if you have different guidelines for different C properties. So to answer your question, it depends on the property. So if if a property is C property and your tenants tend to be a little bit lower income, then you can go with the lower income requirements.
The lower standard, because that the
Yes.
scenario is like they're probably not going to be making 4x the rent if they're living in a C property.
Exactly. It's fair. So the other thing is you have to look for is call the previous landlords and ask questions. They are limited to what they can answer because of privacy laws and things like that. But the main questions that you can ask and get a really good idea how the tenant is that they can always answer is, would you rent to this tenant again?
That's a nugget right there.
Yeah.
Would you rent to this tenant again?
Yes. The other thing you can ask is, do they have any outstanding balance with you?
That's good to know. What about calling the landlord before what if you call the second landlord, like the landlord before they went to their?
Yeah. Yes, anybody can get on the line.
Just get them. So that's what I do normally. I'll basically have their previous landlord and then the landlord before that. And I actually will call the oldest one first, because they usually have, like, I'll give you an example real quick. So I had a tenant I evicted. They were just I inherited them. They were bad. So when they moved out, their landlord called me, their new landlord called me, and I was evicting them. And this is just a fact of the matter. They were like, what are your thoughts on this person? And I was like, well, when they paid, they usually paid on time. When they paid, they usually paid on time.
That's true, because you have to be careful what you're disclosing.
Exactly. And I didn't want to shoot myself in the foot, but I also didn't want to have the landlord not rent to them because of, so I said, when they paid on time. They seemed like nice people. I think it potentially could be a fit. I was very vague, right? And the reason I was vague is because I wanted them out of my property. And I wasn't going to let this, because I knew the landlord was going to call me because they had to do that. But it's a little bit of a slippery slope when you're evicting. We'll get into that in a minute. But you want to be vague. You don't want to be too, detailed with people. So that's all good stuff. So we want to make sure we have reasonable expectations from their income based on the type of property. Background check is huge. Bankruptcies could be fine, especially if it was a long time ago. And you want to definitely stay away legally in your state if you can, not rent to someone who's already had an eviction before, because that's just history repeating itself.
Let me give you a few tips.
Sure.
Just when you talk to the tenant. really quickly over the phone how to figure out if it's a good or bad.
Sure.
First red flag is if the tenant calls you and says, I want to move in tomorrow. This urgency, there's something wrong with it. There's always kind of a sob story behind it. So if they want to move in tomorrow, that's a red flag. Be very careful. Second thing is if you set up an appointment with the tenant to come and see the property and the tenant is late quite a bit, they already showed you that not respecting your time, they will not respect you during the tenancy. That's a red flag too. Also, another red flag to be careful is if the tenant gets paid in cash, no pay stubs. So that's another thing. There's no way you can prove it. There's no way you can garnish salaries later if they default on anything. So be very careful. Actually, lately we've been started getting fake statements. And yes, everything fake. Photoshop it's very popular, but technology is catching up. So our software detects fakes, and when they report income, there's a national database they can check the income if it matches and stuff like that. But so the point is also be careful with fake statements.
Okay, interesting. Let me ask you this question about that. So I have a property. Actually, I on steroided this property, and I did rent to this tenant, and so far they're all right. They didn't have any credit because they're new to America. They don't speak English, which, like I said, I don't care about. Like, it doesn't matter to me. So the collateral, AKA their credit, was something I needed to, that was a problem for me. So the broker that I had rent it, I said, listen, I'll rent to these people, but I need somebody to co-sign this lease with really good credit, and I need that as collateral. So they ended up, getting someone who was qualified to basically sign on their behalf and put their credit up as collateral. Basically, we made an exception to that rule because that person had that skin in the game, but the person who's living there didn't really have a great backing because of the credit. They just didn't have it. So, I mean, what would you would you have rented to that person if it was a scenario with me, or would you kind of been like,
without a co-signer, no.
No, with the co-signer. Like,
yes, with co-signer is fine. Yes,
That's
fine. Everybody deserves a chance. Then when you meet the people, have a conversation. Usually, some of these people come with cash, and they usually don't want any trouble with the law and evictions and things like that, especially when they're new to the country overall. I speak out of experience. I was the same way when I came here 20 years ago.
Yeah, you got to give people a chance. And I was a little like, but then I said, you know what? They seem like nice people. It's a nice home. It's really good shape. I said, if they put the co-signer there and their credit's on the line, they pay right away. They're very easy to deal with, knock on wood. And, I was just happy to give them obviously a chance to live in a nice home in a decent, it was a BC property. I can't say it's,
I mean, there's always exceptions to the rules, and what can you do, but 100%. Here's the other thing. Be careful when you do exceptions because you can get sued later. So now if you get another property, a tenant with the same situation, and you deny this tenant and they sue you and they come and say, hey, for this property allowed in the same situation, this person to go in, but you're denying me for the same reason, you're breaking the fair housing rules.
That's true.
And regardless if you're licensed, not licensed, property managers, managing yourself, you're subject to the fair housing rules.
100%. Yeah, you got to be careful. And you got to work, here's the main point here. You got to work with someone who knows what they're doing. Property management company, leasing agent, or if you're doing it yourself, you need to really be educated because there's a lot of red tape all across the country. It doesn't matter if you're in a landlord state or a tenant state, it's national laws or national laws. So let's cover now, let's transition into, we have the property rented out to a qualified tenant who's grateful to be living there. How do you handle ongoing property maintenance once a tenant moves in terms of having reasonable requests come through and avoiding this property being like a constant burden for the landlord or for the tenant in that matter?
And property maintenance is the biggest issue for everybody and the biggest issue for property managers. That's where most property management companies fail, and property managers fail also.
Interesting.
So you have to set up some few rules. Depends if you're a property management company or you do it yourself. But let's come up with some basics that you can reduce your maintenance expense. So first one is regular inspections. That's what most of the property management companies and the landlords don't do. As far as they get the check, the rent on the first, they don't care. They're like, oh my God, great tenant, 5 years, he hasn't missed a payment. Have you seen the property? No. Okay. Then they move out, you go there, $15,000 of damages. Yeah, they paid on time, but whatever. So in our property management company, the rule is first we guarantee the tenant, of course, and if the tenant does anything, we have to replace it for free. So we are very careful. But when we get a tenant on the third month of the tenancy, we go and inspect the property. First, you want to show to the tenant that you care about them having a good property. You check the property and make sure nothing is health and safety issues. But at the same time, you check if the tenant, they are who they are, they didn't have any extra people or pets and things like that, and to see how they treat the property from the very beginning.
Got it.
So if you get something right in the first 90 days, then you can react. Second thing is, do not renew the lease until we do inspection on the property. So 3 months. On the 12th month, tenant says, I want to extend for another 12 months. No problem. The property manager, our property manager goes there, does inspection on the property. If there are any damages done by the tenant, the lease will not be renewed until that is fixed. So this way, you keep the maintenance on the property ongoing. You don't lump it up at the end and have huge expense. You just do it as it goes.
You do it in batches versus waiting till the end and then having this huge.
Exactly. Rule of thumb, 1 rent per year should go into the maintenance of the property, roughly. If you haven't done anything for 5 years, you're going to have 5 rents that will go into the property. The other thing is, once you get a call for repairs, if there's small stuff, just don't go. Don't go and fix it. If it's something can wait, just put it on to-do list and then combine few small orders in one going, or push them towards the renewal. When you do other stuff, do another small stuff, because most of the expense we have is labor. If the repair is cost $25 for the material, you're gonna pay $100 for the trip for the handyman to go back and do it. So if you combine few of $25 repairs and you pay the handyman one trip of $100, they can get it done quickly, you're going to be saving money.
You're saving money, and you're not delaying. You don't want to delay these repairs. That's where I see people really get in trouble.
So this comes. So every time you get a request for repairs, call the tenant. And what we do, we call the tenant and we try to troubleshoot it over the phone. We get pictures. We want pictures always, regardless if you're going to troubleshoot it over the phone or you're going to send it to a vendor to go there. You want to have the pictures and a good explanation so the vendor do not have to do multiple trips and charge you more when you tell them, hey, this is broken, this is the picture, this is what. And the vendor, by the explanation and by the pictures, they already know what materials they need, what instruments they need, and so they can fix it quickly and more efficient, so you don't have to spend a lot of money.
No, that makes sense. You're doing it efficiently, especially at scale.
Yeah, troubleshoot it over the phone and try that. The other thing is, we absolutely do not take work orders over the phone. Stop doing that. Oh, even the tenant calls you with something, say, hey, hang up, send me an email or text message, if you're self-managed. We have an online CRM that the tenant has to log in and submit a request for work order. Everything is stamped, date, hour, explanation. They can upload pictures and everything, so we can work it out. The big thing here is lease agreement is done properly. You're going to have a sentence where it says that when the tenant requests maintenance repair, automatically give you a permission to enter the property. So this is a big thing, because regardless of any request, you have to have permission from the tenant to enter the property. So if you send a vendor without permission and vendor goes there, tries to go in and something, it might get you in trouble.
Yeah.
So do not take anything over the phone. Always, even if you have a conversation with a tenant, ask him to put it in writing. text message, email, whatever that works for you, so you can have a stamp and pictures. And try to use handyman. We have an in-house handyman that we reduce the cost significantly by using handymans. We don't say like if it's a small stuff up to 5,000, we have a licensed handyman to do it. We don't do like a licensed plumber or licensed electrician or licensed something, specialist in something, if we can avoid it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And most stuff is really handyman kind of stuff, at least from my experience. It's like, moving in a washer or dryer or changing out a broken door.
It is most of it. So you just have to have different people for different things. So this is how we pick our vendors. This is how you could pick your vendors. There's 3 types of vendors. First vendor is the single guy, the professional that does it himself.
Chuck in the truck, I call him.
Yes. He's really good in what he does. He can talk over the phone. He can do it the best work at the cheapest price. But he's busy. He wants to get paid immediately. And he's not good with paperwork. So you might have to chase him for invoices and things like that. They're not very organized business-wise.
No, that's so true.
So the next level is mom and pop shop. And these are like the professional with a helper and an office person. So, this is a little more organized. You get, it's a little bit more expensive, but things are getting done quickly on time, and bigger jobs could get done with mom and pop shop way, way better. So you just have to pick. And the last one is the big company that advertises on radio that, call me, we'll fix this any time of the day. Avoid that. Don't even call them. This is like 2 or 3 times the regular price. Is just robbery. So use single guys, handyman, or mom and pop shops. They will be the best. Depends on the size of the. The other thing you can avoid the maintenance to reduce the cost is in the lease, put the tenant is required to take care of any filters and any bulbs in the property. And the lights go out and bulbs have to be replaced. It's the tenants. Another thing that in that matter, landlords tend to put rules when they do it themselves is that up to $100 of repair, do not call me. You're the one responsible for that. You do the work. Sure. So there's a couple problems with that. I would avoid it if you could. First, the tenant will try to avoid in any way to spend money on your property. So they're going to ignore this until that $75 repair is $750 repair. Yeah. They're gonna avoid that. So if you put it on the tenant, $100 is too much. They're not gonna do it, and it's gonna be too many things at the same time for you to fix later. And the second problem with this is if you allow the tenant in any situation or ask the tenant to do any repair on your property, and that tenant gets hurt during the repair,
you're
responsible. And the tenant had no idea that he can sue you. He'll go to an attorney, and attorney's going
to sue you.
Oh my God, perfect situation. So
we got a rich landlord and a pissed off tenant. Let's get some money.
Yeah, so that's a little problem. But try to avoid that if you can. It's not a good practice.
Another thing I'd say too is like if you're a landlord, just use common sense. Like if it's something doesn't pass the smell test, you got to understand that you got to use logic here, and you got to, people, a lot of like mom and pop landlords, they just don't use their brains and they get themselves in these quagmires. So Oggie, we got so much stuff we're covering. How about we do this? I want to cover one more point, but there's so much more stuff I want to cover with you. We're going to do a part 2 episode on this where we'll cover more stuff because there's just so much value here. I want to keep these episodes, 30, 40 minutes so everyone can listen to this. So we're going to cover one more thing on this episode, and then we'll actually schedule a part 2 and we'll go even deeper because I just feel like this is such a relevant topic to people who follow our show. I feel like we really want to bring them as much value as we possibly can. So the last point in today's episode I want to cover is at the end of the day, when it comes to vacancy reduction. Now, this is something where, it just kills landlords. It just kills them. They have this constant turnover. So what are some tips you have for the listeners on how to really reduce vacancies and avoid these long turnover periods?
Okay, so let's start with the first most common thing is pricing. When tenant leaves, you want to list the property vacancy.
Yeah.
Don't overprice, don't test the market.
Sure.
And because if you try to get $100 more and nobody goes in and you lose 1 month vacancy, which is, let's say, $1,200 a month, divided by 12, that's already $100.
Yeah.
You lost.
Shot
Trying
yourself
to get
in the foot.
you screwed. Yeah. So you'd be better off putting the lower price, rented the day or within a week, and then when you have a good tenant, slowly increase the rent down the road. So do not overprice your rentals. If you happen to overprice them, adjust quickly, because rental market is way faster than the sales market. You cannot wait 30 days to adjust. If you don't have anything done within a week, no showings, nothing, adjust the price. On every 5-6 showings, you need to get a lease signed and ready to go. So this is the first. Don't get greedy. Just get person in quickly, because 1 month vacancy is just equal. So when you do your calculations, don't look at per month. Look at for the year. When you do budgeting, look at for the year.
Great point.
All right. Second thing is the turnover between tenants. That's where the efficiency goes away. So what we do is, with our processes, we want the tenants to give us 60-day notice. So we probably start the conversation of renewal 3 months before it ends.
This is a big one.
Yes. So 60 days, the tenant has to give us a notice, 60 days before they leave. So at the moment the tenant gives a notice, the property manager has to go and review the property, inspect the property personally, and makes a list of what is going to need to be repaired for the turnover. Picks the right vendors and schedules the work the day after the tenant moves out. So this way, you don't have the tenant move out, then you go check the property, then you decide what to do, then you start looking for vendors, then you're scheduling. So instead of a week, you're going into 3 weeks.
So be proactive with it. If you know the tenant's moving out, get a heads up. So then the second they move out, you can get that property cleaned up and right on the rental market to avoid.
Yeah, but you have to go and check the property, make a punch list, and get it ready. At the same time, once you do the checklist and you see that the property will be ready to be fixed and back on the market within a week after they move out, then you put the property on the market for rent. Don't do it too early, like 3 months ahead. Maybe no more than 2 months or 1 month and a half before the property is really available, because most tenants look from a month and 2 ahead. They don't look at 6 months ahead.
No,
it's very
that's a rare
uncommon.
case.
So
yeah, it's a rare case.
So get ready for turnover maintenance and start marketing the property in advance.
And don't overprice the unit.
Don't overprice the unit. So here's the other thing that most property managers don't do, and it's just what we do in our practices. Our leases are not 12 months. Our leases are based on when the 12-month is ending. So we do not end leases in July and August, and we do not end leases in November and December and beginning of January. Because in Arizona, November, December, it's holidays, nobody wants to move. It's very hard to find a new tenant to move into the property.
Yeah.
So if you cannot find a tenant, that means that the property is going to stay vacant for longer. So what we do is we avoid these months. If the lease ends October 30th or November 30th, we push it 2 more months until end of January, which becomes 14 months lease.
That's smart.
So this way, you're avoiding the bad times. Let's say New York, there's areas that it's cold, snow, nobody wants to move there, right? Correct?
No, not in the winter. Yeah. That makes sense. Spring is the best time for leases, right?
Depends on the market.
Yeah.
Market, yeah, spring usually is. And the other time we don't end leases is July and August here in Phoenix.
Summer, peak summer.
Yeah, people move usually, but this is strictly for us because we want to take vacation. We don't want to have too much work happening during these 2 months. So it applies the same for you. If you have multiple rentals, you don't want to be dealing with turnover, repairs, management, and things like that, applications. Give yourself 2 months easy. just handling the usual stuff.
Yeah, do it in the fall. That makes sense.
Yeah,
No,
doing the fall. So here's the last point that most people don't realize. Our leases do not end on 30th.
When do they
Our
end?
leases in the middle of the month on 15th.
Interesting.
Because if you follow our rules and start preparing the property 60 days prior to the tenant moving out, you're already prepared to do the repairs within a week. You're already marketing the property and you have a tenant ready. So when you say to the tenant, hey, the property is going to be ready on 5th, you just have to pay me 25 days prorated in advance, the tenant's going to say, I have until 1st. 25 days is too much to pay. I don't want to pay 25 days in advance because I'm not going to be able to move. But if you say, hey, the lease ends on 15th, by 20th, I'll be ready for you to move in.
It's only 10 days.
Only 10 days. And tenant says, okay, 10 days, I can afford that because it's easy for me to move.
Yeah, they're transitioning in and out of there.
So with this little trick, moving the end of the lease in the middle of the month, you are increasing your chances of closing that gap of vacancy. But that thing doesn't work unless you implement the 60-day rule with inspection and scheduling and marketing in advance.
Those are such good tips, man. I mean, there's so much we can cover on this. Like, so the thing I loved about the show today, the part one, was everything that you shared, and I mean this, was practical and people can apply this right away anywhere in the country. So like,
yes, this is across the board, all the same. You can interview your property managers in this way and say, hey, what's your policy of this? What do you do about this? In this way, you can compare what I'm telling you right now as a property manager, owner of property management company, and what the person you want to hire, because for me, we keep high standards because my rental properties are in my property management company and they are managed exactly the same way like the clients.
Yeah.
So I set the rules for me to like him.
Exactly.
So I can save money. Exactly. So our property managers handle my properties exactly the same way everybody else. There's no difference. So
that's a big thing with property.
I go there and most of these rules I came up with experience in trying to cut cost and efficiency. That. So
that makes sense. So we're going to do part two before we end the show today. If someone's in Phoenix and they want you to manage their properties, especially because you actually have your own property, so you know what you're doing, what is the name of your property management company? How can they get in touch? ProX
Realty Management, and online. The best thing is online. ArizonaProX.com.
ArizonaProX.com. And then if they want to learn how to be a rental property savage, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you directly?
Just my cell phone, 602-405-8156. Call me, or soon we're going to have the website burronsteroids.com. That will be coming, Burr on Steroids. We make people millionaires.
You made me one.
Yep.
So listen, we're going to do part two. People will reach out to you if they're interested in the property management company, or I highly recommend checking out Oggie's coaching program. It's phenomenal. It's helped me a ton. Now I got my rental property system dialed in. Thanks to Oggie. He really blew my brain on how to do this the right way. So please reach out to Oggie. He's a wealth of knowledge, and we will do part number two, and we will go even deeper with this rental topic.
Let's do it, man.
Appreciate your time today.